Hello and welcome to Grody and Unprofessional. My name is Justin McMenemy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons I have acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, we discuss Harley-Davidson's product extension into home goods and how to show off your retirement assets at the proctologist office. Jeff Snowden, welcome to Grody and Unprofessional.
I prepared for this show by getting both grody and unprofessional before coming on.
That is absolutely true. I think it's in episode 10 of Lemonade Lessons 2 that I disclose the origin of the name Grody and Unprofessional, which is facial hair not meeting organizational expectations of an established business. And you, sir, currently are the most grody and unprofessional guest I have had based on the facial hair that you are sitting here with right now. Tell me the story of how you ended up with that facial hair.
Well, first of all, you're like, hey, you're the most grody and unprofessional on here. But your podcast participants are all like well-polished people, present company excluded. That's like saying, well, I'm the fastest kid at the fat camp. For me to be the grodiest unprofessional people amongst all these other really august people, I feel pretty good about that.
Wait a second. I think Caleb Schlater would take offense to what you just said.
Schlater would look at my beard and be so shocked by its majesty, he would shave his off in a moment. In fact, I'll text a picture to him. We'll see if that happens.
You told me the story. Give me a play-by-play of yesterday in the barbershop, how you ended up with the facial hair that you currently have.
Well, my wife, she's such a sweetheart. She's like, when you went to that wedding a couple of months ago and you had that professional beard trim, it looked really nice. And so I was like, okay, I'll go have my hair cut. On the way to get my hair cut, there was a homeless guy at the end of the street. There's a bus stop, and he was running out in the middle of the road and going crazy. And yeah, I pulled over. I said, what's going on, dog? What's the matter? He says, the bus hasn't come. And I said, it'll come. I said, don't worry. Look, I'll make sure the bus will come. And I'm going to call the transit people and just be like, hey, you got some guys out here that said bus has been a little slow or something like that. And they're normally really good about that. I turn the corner and lo and behold, here comes the bus. And I'm talking to my brother on the phone. It's like, that dude, he thinks this wizard pulled up next to him and conjured a bus out of nowhere. I was thinking about that on the way to the barber shop. I told the guy, he goes, what do you want to go for? I was like, look, man, I got to clean it up because it's looking a little scraggly. But the closest I can get to looking like a wizard, the better. And he's like, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I show up at my oldest son's basketball game, and my wife's like, I thought you were going to get your beard trimmed. It's like, oh, it's trimmed. It's trimmed, yeah. She's like, but it's still really long. I said, yeah, it is. But I wanted to add this postscript to the discussion is that, man, for a long time, I had to polish the shoes, put in the cufflinks, tuck the pocket square the right amount. I'd have the car washed before going to big meetings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I had to do that for a really long time because the space I was operating in at that time valued those things. After the pandemic, I kind of said, you know what? I'm pivoting gears in a lot of other ways. I want to see how long I can grow my hair out. And while I'm at it, I'm going to try to grow my beard really long like Rasputin. As long as my wife thinks it's cool, and she does. She thinks I look like a Viking. I just don't know that I care.
That does not surprise me.
Yeah.
That does not surprise me in the least. What I would say, and I take this as a compliment, Jeff. Please take this as a compliment. I would describe your look right now as Gandalf the Graying. Not quite Gandalf the Gray yet, but Gandalf like in his maybe his mid 200s. He's graying. He's headed for Gandalf the Gray.
I'm Gandalf the Grody.
That's right. Well, Jeff, I'm excited for this conversation. You are presently a partner at a marketing firm, and we're going to get there. But what I'm most excited about this conversation is to talk through your career. You've made a number of changes in your career. You've had a number of pivots in your career. And what I want to talk through at each node is not just the what. This isn't a review of your resume. This isn't a review of exactly the things you've done. But the part that I really enjoy about conversations with you is how intentional you are in the why.
Yeah.
how thoughtful you are and say, this happened and this happened, and that's why I headed in this direction. What I'd like to do today is talk through a number of the decisions you've made in your career that I know people are wrestling with similar decisions along their own career path or along their own family path. And so we can start at the beginning, not at your birth date. We're not going to start that far back at the beginning. But talk to me about the selection of marketing as a profession. How did you go from the universe of possibilities? I'm guessing a guy like you wanted to at some point be an astronaut and a rock star and a this and a this. How did you end up choosing marketing?
Well, I've always been a storyteller. Go back even to high school. I got to take a series of acting and dramatic arts classes from a guy named Bill Daly. He was actually in Return of the Swamp Thing. He was an actor and an acting coach and teacher at Duluth High School in Duluth, Georgia, which is where I went to high school. He encouraged us. He would we ran the gamut of offensive, just sophomoric humor and stuff like that. And he would let us go with it and act it out. And he would laugh and he would critique and stuff like that. And just really let us tell every story we wanted to tell. Just get it out there and have fun with it. Write a play, do some improv, that sort of stuff. At the same time, I was a musician and would write songs. This is right in the midst of like the ska era.
This is Mighty Mighty Boss Tones.
Oh, yeah, even before, just a little bit before that. But yeah, so your songs were always kind of irreverent or goofy. You might write like a song about how good a submarine sandwiches is or something. They're always kind of ridiculous. I knew that I enjoyed that. Another part I really loved about it, too, is doing promotions for the bands. You'd make like goofy flyers. Like I remember we had a flyer that said our band was Duluth's #1 non-dairy export. It's just goofy, being stupid. And so I loved that. And then, like a lot of people, I graduated high school having no idea what I wanted to do. I knew college was something I should do, but for a variety of reasons that we will get into later, I wasn't ready to leave home. I wasn't ready to be away from home. So I stayed around home and went to community college, and I worked in a camera shop. And right around that same time, my father had worked for Canon Corporation, and he had won a camera in a contest, and so he gave it to me. And I got into being a photographer, and then that was a whole nother level of telling stories. I ended up becoming a photojournalist for my school newspaper. I ended up becoming an independent photographer, later a commercial photographer, and I actually had a nice little budding photography business. And it was making money, and I was gaining clients and stuff like that. Still moonlighting at the camera shop because that's where you get, discounts. This is back when they had film and processing. You get all your discounts on that stuff.
Sure.
Equipment. I'm in the camera shop one day, and I had taken on a propensity for selling. I really liked selling cameras because I was passionate about cameras, and as a photographer, really getting into it. And so this lady comes into the camera shop. She's like, I want to buy 50 packs of Polaroid film. Now, the way we were paid 20% of the gross margin of whatever we sold, and Polaroid film was pretty high margin. Most people would not look a gift horse in the mouth. They're just going to be like, hell yeah, I'll get you that. So she asked me for this, and I was like, what on earth do you want that for? She said, well, I work at this major pharmaceutical company down the street, and we're doing a drug that's an eye drop. You put it in people's eyes. We need to have doctors all across the country send us in pictures of the eyes. I was like, you're going to do this with Polaroid? She said, yeah, we're using passport cameras, and then we're going to scan it. And I was like, wow, that's the dumbest idea I think I've ever heard. I said, check this out. I conveniently reach over the $600 camera and pull down the $1,000 camera. And I'm like, I'm going to take a picture of your eye, and then you're going to go to have your lunch. And then you're going to come back, and I'm going to show you what this picture really need to look like. I got the camera out, and I took a couple pictures of her eye. And then I think we even might have done for test case, used the passport camera there and took a picture. And then I went back to my buddy. I was like, I'll give you $10 if you make these the best freaking pictures of somebody's eye you ever can. She comes back, and I show her the comparison, and she's like, wow, this is amazing. This is a big difference. I said, look, the lab here, too, can have these scanned to this magical item. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, called a CD-ROM, which you will put into your computer, and then you guys won't have to flatbed scan all these crappy pictures. And she's like, this is really interesting. How much for 300? And I was like, copies of the picture? Like 50 cents a piece or something. She goes, no, how much for 300 of these cameras?
Oh
And I
my
was like,
goodness.
oh, hello. I said, I suddenly have to go to the restroom. I sold 360 units of camera, lens, flash, but I realized I'd only get 20% of the gross margin. The gross margin on cameras and hardware was not terrific. But what you do make money on was photo finishing. Photo finishing made plenty of money. I asked her, I said, well, how many rolls of film are you going to run through this? She says, thousands, 5 to 7,000. I said, what if I gave you 5% off the top and you prepaid? She's like, done. So these included the roll of film, the photo finishing, the scanning to magical CD-ROM, all of that.
Right.
Prepaid plus all the cameras. Okay?
Wow.
It was the biggest single ring they'd ever seen through a store. It was huge.
Right.
I get this big commission and all that stuff, big deal. My boss talked to me. She's like, you made some real noise with, ringing the largest commercial sale and all that sort of stuff. What do you think your future would be? You want to go sell commercial and do that? And I said, I've thought this through and I think I'm going to quit. And I did. And I took that money and I invested some of it in commercial camera equipment to continue my photography. But I went off to college. No one in my family had ever done that. And when I say went off to college, I'm going to go away to a giant university with a massive football thing. I'm going to join a fraternity. I'm not going to work. I do photo shoots occasionally, but commercial photo shoots pay pretty good. They did back then. And so I had money to live off of, and I was living the dream. Here's where the nexus came together. I like taking pictures. I like telling stories, but I also really like selling. I never lost that sales bug. I love to sell. This is kind of how I made the entree into the marketing world. I got a degree in psychology because it was the fastest one I could finish with my community college credit. Get out of the university and just go see what's out there. I had my sights set a little bit on going to Chicago. The ad industry was pretty hot there. Ended up getting a job in Metro Atlanta. The main thing that they wanted me for is because I was a photographer. By having an employee who's also a photographer, you could shop down a ton of those expenses because photographers can be very expensive. That was my entry into the advertising world. During this whole time, ever since I had quit the camera shop, I had rallied back together with my longtime rock climbing partner, Richard Tatarski. He was an internal graphic artist and web developer for some really, really big companies. But he just wasn't loving it. And he's like, man, I'd rather do something I really get into. One day, he called me, he said, I think I'm going to quit my job today. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to quit my job today. And so we both quit our jobs, went home. He told his wife, I told my girlfriend, who's now my wife, yeah, I quit my job. And she was like, what? I had $3,000 maybe in the bank. Broken down car, not a whole lot to show. And we felt like what we could do in the industry was more than what we saw.
So to dovetail off of that, as you think about marketing, your approach, your passion, and your experience, what are the elemental truths?
I wrote a book back in 2009 called The Promise and the Trust. And the Promise and the Trust lays out a very basic view of marketing. Marketing really comes down to two things. What are you promising, and can they trust you? What's the promise? Is it unique? Like, are you promising something that I can't get elsewhere? Either by product design or by how it's delivered or price or whatever. You're promising something I can't get elsewhere. Number two, we call the economic trade-off. Everything I have to give up to go with your product, how does that measure up to everything I'm going to get in return?
It's not just economic either, right? There's an experiential trade-off. There's a knowledge trade-off. There's a relational trade-off.
There's an esteem trade-off.
Exactly. An esteem trade-off.
If you pulled up in my front driveway and you saw like a Daewoo, you'd be like, oh, look at that. Snowden drives a Daewoo. You would have like feelings and thoughts about that. And I know you'd have feelings and thoughts. If you pulled up and you saw a brand new F-150 Lightning, we deal with this a lot of times with challenger brands trying to be. It's like, look, man, you're asking that guy to change a product that he has a flag on his flagpole and a mailbox that has that brand on it.
Right. The rock at the end of the driveway has the year he was married and your logo
Yeah.
engaged in it. That's a huge transaction.
Who's going to dig it out, right? Like, who's going to come in
Right.
there and dig the rock out when it's done? The last element of that promise, I talked about is it differentiated? There's that trade off. And then the last one is it believable that you're the one to fulfill that promise? There's so many brands out there that make these claims, these huge claims. Does anyone believe that?
What would be an example in your mind recently that you've seen?
When Coors came out with bottled water, it's water from the Rockies. Nobody bought it. Nobody bought it. Done. Harley Davidson at one point, I believe, had a line of scented candles. Like, what do you think the Harley Davidson scent is?
I would say incomplete combustion is probably the scent of a Harley Davidson.
You're more charitable than I am. There are tons of things out there in the world that we try to claim, and it's like it totally could be true, but no one believes you. Understanding that brands and businesses and products, there's a limit to which they can stretch and to which they can claim. So that's the things I ask is, are you promising something that, first of all, is different than what's being promised in the market space? Does the trade-off work? And then finally, is it believable that you could do that promise?
I did not have this question planned, but I'm interested. You brought up all of the trade-offs that take place, both financially and relationally and in all the domains. Let's use the electric truck market just for a moment here. You have Ford, who went with the electric Lightning, and they chose an arc in which the skin of the vehicle is virtually identical to a F-150. So driving at 60 miles an hour, it's difficult for most people in society to tell the difference between an IC engine F-150 and a Lightning. You have what could not possibly be a more different approach with the Cybertruck. From space, you can tell that that is a Cybertruck. They both require trade out in some domains, whether it be putting an electric charger at the house and on and on. As you think about the truck market, which approach between those two extremes do you think was the more right approach in a marketing and sales lens?
The beginning of electrical vehicles, a big part was that you got to let everybody know that you drove an electric vehicle.
Yes.
I mean, they were designed to look specifically different. And they have all this stuff on them all over the place to let you know. There was this whole like virtue signaling thing that went along with them. So now you got to translate into, what if I don't want any of that? You know what I do? Then I put it in a regular F-150 skin because I don't want anyone knowing that. Now, over on the Cybertruck side, it gets your attention in the same way that maybe a DeLorean does. You see a DeLorean? Ooh, a DeLorean. Look how goofy. And then you're like, well, that's fun. It's novel. I don't know how I'd use it. It doesn't look to be practical for pretty much anything, but I think it's fun. I personally think that the Cybertruck is just a toe dip for Tesla to test this market, to see a little bit. I think the real product they're going to be bringing for the truck style market comes later.
I'm so fascinated by those two products. On the spectrum of who you're targeting, you cannot get farther away from each other than the F-150 Lightning and the Cybertruck. The Cybertruck is clearly for the early adopter who wants to be known, whether it's at 60 miles an hour or parked in a parking lot. And the F-150 is really skinned like, I don't want my friends to know maybe that I've got one. You mentioned the early phase. If you go back a generation, Honda and Toyota both launched the hybrid version of the Prius and the Civic very close to one another. The Prius obviously squared off and had a very progressive design.
Yeah.
Civic skinned it exactly the same and just put this tiny little badge on the back. Technology aside, I think Toyota ultimately ended up with a better technology, but the hybrid Civics collapsed. Why? Because people wanted to be known.
I need you to know about it.
It's the early group that wants to be known, and it's the later group that doesn't want to be known.
You ask yourself, like, what problem did the Cybertruck solve?
Elon Musk's desire. Why does the Cybertruck exist? because Mr. Musk wanted one.
It sounds like Homer Simpson's car. You remember when they had like Homer Simpson car, where like the family would ride in a separate compartment, so you wouldn't have to listen to them. It's like,
Right.
car company's like, "All right, Mr. Simpson, you tell us everything you want," and it's like, doesn't matter if it's rational or not. Just let me throw it all out there, you know.
Exactly right.
The promise and the trust. The assumption is that you made a good promise, okay? It stands up to scrutiny. And there's another element that we get into with the Cybertruck is, did you really solve a problem? Is the way you solved that problem differentiated? Is the economic or emotional trade-offs that you're asking for versus you're delivering worth it? And then finally, is it believable that you could solve that problem? That's your promise. Assuming that what you have passes that test, then we have to create trust with the consumer. And the first one is can you explain it? We're laughing at that like, oh, you know, how couldn't you? Man, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how bad people try to explain stuff. The interaction between the engineers and the product developers gets over to marketing. Next thing you know, you have a dancing cat on a trampoline. No, it's a TikTok strategy. Don't worry. Can you explain what the thing actually does? Number two, can you create identification with the person, either heartfelt or humor or shared frustration when things don't go the way? Can you create identification with them? And then finally, third, can you get some form of endorsement? Now, I don't care if that's an engineering society. It could be a celebrity if the connection's there. It could be a pretty dedicated user, someone who gets a lot of value out of this. This whole philosophy of promise and trust is, do you have a good promise? Can you get people to trust it? I hate to give away the whole secret sauce right here, but that's all it is. Helping them formulate the promise correctly and then carrying it through into the activities that build trust. If we're not doing that, then it's just really expensive poetry.
At one point in your career, you took a role as a director of brand marketing at a large multinational organization. Talk to me about the trade-offs that you considered going into that type of role, from talent outside into in-house, and then ultimately, what was it that led you in that direction?
My firm basically rented me to the corporation for a year to go in and do this job. I actually never officially departed Snowden Tatarski. I just took on a single client for a little more than 12 months. I had the title, I had all those things, but I received my paycheck by the corporation paying the firm and then the firm paying me.
Okay.
Interesting thing, though. The first day that I took that job, almost nobody knew, and it was going to be revealed and all that stuff. I remember going in the parking lot, and I stood at the sidewalk right out front, and I started crying and praying. And I knew the temptation that sat ahead of me. There's something weird when you get that new title. All of a sudden, you can get away with more. All of a sudden, your jokes are a lot funnier to the people that work underneath your position. All of a sudden, instead of you booking your own hotel, there's a person that books it for you. You're in the new club all of a sudden. I had grown up with a father that was in corporate America, and I had friends. And look, I'd been associated with a lot of companies for a long time and saw people make that transition to that new place. And it was in that transition that I saw people have their biggest challenges. That was when people broke their families apart. That was when people had major issues with substance abuse. It was this new world that felt fundamentally different than where you were before. I was almost mourning in the parking lot, and I begged God. I was like, please don't let me change. I want to do this, and I want to do this well. But I don't want to go over to the dark side. I don't want to be one of these guys that's like, the ends justify the means. I can do whatever I want. I'm in charge. I didn't want to do that. And I'm not just trying to be falsely modest here. I was genuinely scared. I've had other friends in the same situation that call me up. They're like, I'm scared because I don't necessarily fight the way they fight in those meetings, and I don't share the same priorities and the outlooks and the views about people and stuff. I know God heard that prayer, because when I went in, the team that he gave me was remarkable. I will say this, if I had to hold up something that I was most proud of, it's that over that whole year, we fundamentally changed huge numbers of things. And I don't think I lost a single person. The amount of change was huge, but everybody was so flexible and open and such great communicators, and pretty much all of them are smarter than me. They understood where I wanted to go and where I had promised the bosses we would go. And they did it flawlessly.
Hmm.
They did an amazing job. I'm just super grateful to how they helped me through that. They were God's hands and feet in a lot of ways that kept me from the bad things.
Were there things, Jeff, that you put in place, like mechanically, to help you? You use the word temptation, to help you from giving in to temptations, whether they be power or how you treated people or whatever they may be. Are there things you did either relationally or mechanically to help you in that environment?
Yeah. Yeah, there were. I always tried to do things with groups. I rarely did one on ones. As far as like, hey, Jeff and I are going to go travel here and do this, just the two of us. I rarely did that for the appearance of either favoritism or impropriety. And I tried to be mindful of alcohol consumption, particularly in mixed gender company and stuff like that. Oh, we're all just having fun. That's a real easy situation to go down a really bad path. Look, people traveling for work, they get out on the road, they pull off something big, they all go to celebrate at the restaurant or whatever. The beer or the wine is flowing, the inhibitions are down. If you're somebody who's in charge of something, if you have a budget at your disposal that could make or break somebody's year or career, there's going to be things like that. Every time that you find yourself with new responsibility and new power, it's going to come with new temptations. Be deliberate about it and don't be Pollyanna and be like, well, it would happen to me. No, look, it's happened to lots of people where they find themselves in situations that don't live up to the character that they believe or know themselves to have. As you have these situations, take time and reflect. I can't remember who made the comment. I've heard it attributed to Abraham Lincoln, but it was something to the effect of, everyone can weather a certain amount of adversity. If you really want to see the measure of a person, give them power, because that's
Sure.
when the real temptation starts.
Yeah. Some of the things that I tried to put in place, these aren't going to be like mechanical things, but they're probably as much intellectual and psychological things. One for me was to actively remind myself and really try to press to make sure that my self-worth, my self-value, my identity did not become entangled into the title or into the power. You talked about travel being booked or better parking spots or better cars. Some of the things that I did, I didn't take an office. Could have had an office. For me in that season, in that organization, not taking an office was a daily reminder, you're not special.
Yeah.
You sit in a cube with everybody else. And to me, that was a big part of keeping myself grounded. Another thing that I did when I would introduce myself outside of a professional environment, this is at the junior high softball game, this is meeting someone at church, invariably one of the first 4 or 5 questions is, what do you do? I always answered the question, I'm an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the engineering organization. My title was something much bigger and much more grandiose and on and on. But I answered the question, I'm an engineer, because I didn't want to establish a relationship in which it was like, oh, he's this or he's this. A lot of it is not necessarily how you wake up on day one and think you are. But if you are treated a certain way by so many people in so many directions for such a period of time, that's when I at least thought that that could then start to creep in. Even getting compliments is a dangerous thing, right? There's a biblical example that was very influential in my thinking. It is when David is returning from war with Saul and they're singing the praises and they say Saul and his thousands, David and his 10,000s. It's very real and very possible that that song destroyed 2 men. It created anger and bitterness in Saul and at least watered pride and arrogance in David.
It certainly didn't help.
It didn't help. As I wrestled with it, this sounds cliche, but it was truly to put certain aspects in my life that regularly reminded me you're not special, so that it didn't entangle my self-worth and my self-importance into honestly that which is fleeting, whether it be a reorg, whether it be a change in ownership. These things are sand through the hourglass, to use that phrase. It absolutely was something that I was very cautious and guarded in as I progressed through my career. I want to transition, Jeff. So we talk about kind of the career side and the guardrails put in place. The other side I want to talk about is the family side.
Yeah.
I know you have a number of kids, you're married. I know from conversations with you, family and being a dad and being a husband is very important and a big part of how you view your role and how you measure success and how you view your charter. What are things you've done, Jeff, to prioritize your family?
I grew up with a single father. He was a traveling executive, which meant that for a lot of my young life, I was being watched after by babysitters and housekeepers. There was a point for a while that we'd come home to an empty house, and then this like college student who was a really nice guy and almost a member of the family, he would come back from his job at about 7 p.m. and sleep there just to make sure we didn't burn the house down. That's how I did the sixth grade, man. Seventh grade. I mean, my dad would leave Monday morning, come home Friday night, and he was like super corporate. He'd had to do all his corporate work and stuff like that during the weekend because he'd been traveling during the week. He struggled to be involved. When my wife and I started our family, we were pretty determined that we weren't going to let that happen. She's done a good job from like a program standpoint. These are the hard lines. We will take this vacation. Yeah. We are doing this. This will occur. On my side, I try to be very clear to people. It's like I don't travel without a purpose and I don't travel without a purchase order. Being independent, that's not so hard to do. I can say that when I was inside of an organization, there was a little bit of pressure to be like, well, gosh, if you don't go on this, hey, decisions get made on trips, okay? Decisions get made at the bar or decisions get made hanging out in the parking lot of the hotel, and there's things you don't want to miss. But at the same time, I don't give that time away free. That's time that I'm sacrificing away from my family. That's moments of my life, and it's not free. I've become more and more restrictive of my travel in the past 5-6 years. It's always have to be with purpose, but now I'm kind of like, look, I'm not sitting in the car watching it rain for 2 days while we wait on a tractor to start up. Those days are in my past. That's a young man's job. Setting your lines, knowing what your own rules are, that's good for life all the way around. The travel can be devastating, particularly on a young family.
Yeah.
It can be really, really hard on your spouse and your children, and you're going to miss things you can't go back and get. I tell people I'm taking my retirement 2 days a week. Look, you work your rear end off, you travel all that time, you finally retire and all that, and you get to drive a slightly nicer car to the urologist. That's it.
Right.
For me, I'm taking those days off now. I'm taking my retirement now. I can work till I'm dead. And that'll be fine by me. I'll drive my jalopy to the urologist. I take the time off now. I coach youth wrestling. I'm the announcer at the football games. I serve on nonprofit boards around town for different things. I volunteer. And I hang out with my kids a lot. I often am the one picking them up from school, taking them out to do things. My kids really love to fish. They really love to go out on a sailboat. They really dig airsoft. I participate with my kids and do these things. And you know what? I've never regretted a moment of it. I've never been like, gosh, awesome. I really wished I would have made that conference. No, I don't. We're in the woods shooting each other with airsoft guns. Who would want to miss that?
I think one interesting component, at least in my experience, is knowing that the guardrails, those are not static forever and for always. You alluded to it. Depending on how life sequences, there may be a period in which you're in your career in single, and then in your career in married, and then in your career with young children, and in your career with tween children, and in your career with high school. Across that arc, the right degree of guardrails evolves based on the needs of the family, needs of career, things of that nature. For me, it's an ongoing conversation with my wife. It's an ongoing conversation with the family, really determining, okay, here's what we're trying. Here's the experiments we're running. Are they going well? Are they not going well? Do we need to move the guardrails in? Can we let the guardrails out? As you touched on it, time, you can't get it back.
No.
Right. I had a similar, not the same experience. I had a similar experience. My dad had to work 2 jobs for some of my formative years in order to make ends meet. He desperately wanted to be at the baseball games and wanted to be at the plays and wanted to be at the things, but wasn't able to for financial reasons. That was a big part of the calculus of what career I even chose. I wanted a career that did not lead to lots of travel, did not lead to needing the overtime in order to make the ends meet. Not that one is right or one is wrong, but I think both you and I, in this phase of life where we are now, where we have kids in the growing phase and in the launching phase, both of us start the story back when we were that age and the state of family and the state of life at that phase.
I tell people, be your own HR department. Know where you draw lines and
Yeah.
know where certain things need to be for your career development. If the idea is you need to be on the road 4.5 days a week in order to progress in your career, maybe you're at the wrong job. I would also say this too. That applies to all the other things, like the bullying and the meanness and the stuff like that. Some of these guys and gals get into power and they just can't take it. And they go crazy. And next thing you know, they're expecting you to get a PowerPoint ready for them on Sunday night because they didn't do their job and they got to present at the boss's weekly meeting, which is Crack-a-Dong Monday, and they need you to bail them out over and over again. If I could say anything to the people listening, it's like, look, man, it's a job. It's just a job. I know it's been trumped up. It's like, oh, no, it's this stepping stone to this. Yeah, let me tell you, the steps go all over the place. You can take a lot of different routes to get to the same place. If you don't advocate for you, if you don't stand up for you and say, look, this goes against what I want, this goes against how I feel about myself, I will not be talked to that way. I will not be addressed that way. If you don't advocate for you, if you're waiting for Johnny or Susie at the HR department to magically discover this and then come down and tell your boss, no, never happening. You have to be the one to do it. And that did characterize some of my time inside a corporation. I would be very direct, particularly with my adjacent peers and my boss, about what was right, what was proper, what was decent, and what was not. You don't hear things like, hey, man, you don't treat people that way. You don't hear that a lot in corporate America. But maybe we should hear that. Maybe someone should turn to their peer and be like, you know what, bro? You don't treat a person that way. That's improper. Look, HR, they're going to process your check. Once in a while, they're going to show you a video about how not to slap and tickle each other, and you can go to them when you get fired. Other than that, don't expect them to be there powdering your bottom for you. You got to powder your own bottom.
Absolutely. I want to transition one more time to another topic. You've shared publicly in 2021, you had a nervous breakdown.
Oh, yeah.
There were aspects of that you've always felt some propensity towards. And then coming out of COVID and into 21, there was kind of the basal experience. And then there were some acute experiences that started to happen. And it really pushed you to a point that you had never been before of having a breakdown.
Oh, yeah. It was wild.
One, thank you so much for saying it out loud. I think that there are 100-fold the people that experience it versus the people that talk about it. Just share lessons learned and advice or recommendations for people that feel this acuteness coming on or face these temptations, face these struggles.
A good friend of mine described anxiety like an oil reserve down in the ground. The pressure keeps accumulating and accumulating, and then one day some situation drills a hole down and that oil just all comes rushing to the top. For me, it started when I was about 14 years old. I was a very outgoing, popular kid through middle school and stuff. But at the end of 8th grade, I started having these panic attacks. And they were crippling. Let me go ahead and characterize what they feel like. Heart racing, irrational fears, sweating, the feeling that you can't catch your breath. For me, that would last between 10 and maybe 30 minutes, okay? And then after that, it would go away. I told my dad about it. I told him what I was feeling. I went to the doctor, and they said that it was just low blood sugar. Mental health wasn't really talked about at that time as openly as it is now. And so he's just got low blood sugar, and you got to space out your meals or something like that. The situation that you run into with panic attacks is when your mind perceives a threat. I don't care if it's a saber-toothed tiger or Michael Myers standing behind the shower curtain with a knife or something like that. When your mind perceives a threat, it's going to try to look for the source of that threat. If it can't find the source of that threat, it will create it. And that's where people get these really awesome phobias, germophobia, agoraphobia, stuff like that. They get these really awesome phobias because they have this panic reaction and they say, well, my body, my nervous system is telling me that I'm under threat. I must run. I must get away. It must be that. And for me, I got the hefty sum of it. So I had OCD functions to mine. Okay, so which is like my mind's looking for the reason, so it must be because I touched something dirty, I better wash my hands. Oh, did I wash them good enough? The crazy thing about anxiety with an OCD feature on it is that if you do the thing, okay, if you like, oh, I left the stove on, I have to go check it. You check the stove for a second, and there is a immediate but temporary relief of the anxiety. But when you get outside, the anxiety comes back and like, oh, but did I really check it? The truth is yes, of course you checked it. It's just that your body only got temporary relief. The true threat that you're feeling in your nervous system has nothing to do with the stove. Your body just found something to latch onto, and so you got a temporary little boost there, but it's going to make you continue to do it. So that's the really insidious part of where anxiety turns into OCD. Now, one thing that I did benefit from is I was a wrestler, and intense exercise really helped me. I found some ways to get reprieve, but it still did challenge a lot of my life choices. It was the primary reason I didn't go away to college, is that I just had too many unmanageable fears to be 3 hours away from my home base. As I got into my 20s, it became somewhat more manageable. I did have some expanded fears. I always go and tell my doctor. He's like, what do you got today? I said, I'm dying. I have cancer, which is infected with AIDS, and the AIDS has syphilis. And he laughs. He thinks that's hysterical. But I'm one of those people that's like, gosh, I don't want to go to the doctor because I don't want to find out that I'm dying of some awful illness that involves worms coming out of my nose or something like that. Becoming a parent, I had to grow up. I mean, I hate to say grow up, but I had to grow up with some of that stuff because I had to say, hey, I have to protect my health because I have people that I'm responsible for.
But it also introduces a new layer because there are few things that are out of your control as much as the life and the health of your children. And so it introduces a whole new set of variables to be anxious about.
Yeah. Luckily for me, my anxiety tank was always so full that I didn't have a lot of room for other things. I'm married to a very wonderful woman who was very protective of our kids. And so I was too busy dying of AIDS that was infected with syphilis. All of my anxieties were so big and full.
You were already consumed by them.
Consumed is the word, man. It's terrible. That's on top of like other anxieties like work or is the car going to start? All those other things. It was really tough. When I was 19, I gave my life to Christ. I was born again. That gave a whole nother dimension to things. But anyone who thinks that your anxiety is going to go away because you dipped under the water, you may not have the whole story. I asked God a lot of times. I said, God, why am I afflicted with this anxiety? It was weird because through the years, I found myself in a situation that I could minister to people with anxiety. I tell them, I was like, look, man, you're going to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, heart pounding. You pick up that phone, you call me because I've been there. And I can talk you through this, and I can reassure you. And I've had a chance to do that for friends and family. And it started to make sense why God allowed me to have this season of learning and this season of challenging, because I really am humbled and happy that I could be that for somebody. Because, dude, the terror is utterly amazing. To know that another person's going through that and you can come alongside them and be like, look, you can lay down on the ground, you're going to pop a Benadryl, you put your feet up, we're just going to relax our ankles and our knees and our diaphragm, we're going to calm our body down. And for that person to come back down to planet Earth and be like, man, whew, that was a doozy, thank you. That's just, there's something really gratifying about that. Now, COVID hits, okay? So COVID hit at like a really perfect time. I had been asked to work on this revitalization of this product. They wanted me to go around and visit with distributors and stuff like that. I put together a big plan and all that, and we had shared it around the team and stuff like that. We get on the road to go and pitch this, and we told the distributors, if you agree to these terms, we're going to support you with A, B, C, D, and E, and then that's going to help you move these products. So met with 50 distributors. It was a wonderfully successful trip. Shaking hands, hugging backs, making it happen. Put our reputations in line. So it wasn't just me, it was the whole team. So we get back, and I get an upset phone call from my boss that I'm working with on this project. And he's like, they're going to cancel most of what we promised. So what do you mean cancel? He says, yeah, they want to use the budget for something else. I said, we just went out and told these guys that we were going to support them if they stocked these products, and now you're going to pull their pants down? And he's like, there's nothing I can do about it. I went and I called some of the people responsible. I said, what on earth are you doing? You can't do this to these folks. I mean, their trust only lasts so long. These guys were just like, no. And it wasn't even that much money. And they're like, no, we made our decision. We can make the decision, so we have. And then they start making these allegations like my buddy had somehow lied or misled the distributors. I was like, dude, I was in the meeting and I have the PowerPoints, okay? I saw what y'all agreed to. I went in and I had a pretty abrupt talk with the people who had done this. But they weren't going to do anything about it. So then I went to the big boss and had a talk with him about it. He was like, well, it's very interesting and stuff like that. I'll look into it. And I was into that. 2 weeks go by. I get a call from that original group and they're like, we're canceling this contract you have.
Sure.
That was like January of 2020. The pandemic's like 30 days away. I've just severed relationships with a handful of contract owners and stuff like that. And I've got other business and things, but this was a big deal. Then the pandemic hits, okay? This is where it got really crazy. I remember going to God in prayer and being like, hey, God, I'm really in a pickle, There's a virus going around. I just told some people I worked with to go pound some sand. You got any answers? And I felt God lay on my heart. He says, why don't you write a book about Kevin? And I was like, really? It's kind of out there. Is that really you, God, or do I have indigestion from that garlic linguine I had earlier? And so I kept going back to God in prayer. I was like, do you have an answer? I'm earnestly listening, okay? And this is kind of a new thing for me, relatively speaking, in my overall prayer life, is I got to a point where I just really started listening. But I just kept getting an answer I didn't want, which was, hey, Jeff, why don't you write a book? I was like, I don't want to write a book. I need clients. I need work. I need money. I need vindication. I like, God, could you send some burning sulfur from the sky into this specific office to hit this chair at a certain moment? I could take that. No. Why don't you write a book? So I wrote a book. Okay, or at least I started right, because of course, I'm like Jonah here. I'm like, yeah, I'll do a little bit of it. So I wrote an article about a dear friend that I love. He had passed away, and I wrote an article and I posted on LinkedIn. All these people came out of the woodwork. I mean, left and right. They're like, man, he was like a dad to me. He was my first boss. I loved him so much. A guy by the name of Kevin Bean. The famous guy in the industry, Custom Harvesters Hall of Fame. I mean, just everybody knows old Beaner. He was like a second dad to me. My dad had passed in 2010, and Kevin was one of those people that stepped in, and he was dad for me and Richard, and we were very close, personally close. So I was like, okay, God, funny trick. So I wrote another article, and then I wrote another, and then I wrote another. And by that time, I had enough for a book. And I've published books before, so I kind of knew where I was in terms of how much content I needed and then what it would cost to have it printed and all that stuff. So I told everybody, I'm not going to shell out the personal cash to print this because that's some grown-up money. But if people agree to pre-order it, I will print it. Lo and behold, I sold enough to pay off all the costs. Still had a bunch of books left over, so I'm just kind of thinking about this, and I felt laid on my heart. It's like, now mail one to all of his friends. Well, I had Kevin's Rolodex, so I just went through and started mailing it out to his friends. A lot of his friends happened to be dealers and distributors. I started getting these phone calls like, hey, I got this book from you about Kevin, and I really appreciate that. That was such a great story, and I miss him so much and stuff like that. Yeah, and they're like, what are you up to? And right now it's the middle of the pandemic, and I'm like, everybody else, buying ammunition, baking bread. They said, well, are you still doing this or that? I said, no, I'm kind of just hanging out on my own. And some guys started saying, well, could you come help me? It became the genesis of being part of a business being built around distributors and dealers. And sure. I have loved it. I love doing that job. I love my customers. Their character is unassailable. Integrity, it's amazing. Thank you, God. In the midst of putting this together, now remember, I've just gotten in a slugfest with a couple of mid-level executives, and now I'm going to launch this organization that might play in a few people's sandboxes. That's probably the kindest way I can put it.
Sure.
As we come into 2021, all of this stuff is coming into an apex. And I remember being at my office and I just felt my body go into overdrive. This was a panic attack like I had not had in a really long time. I went home and I took my blood pressure, and it was high-ish, but it wasn't dangerously high, but I was too ignorant to know that. So then I just kept taking it. Well, if you've ever done that, if you're worried about your blood pressure, then every time you take it, it'll be higher. When I called the doctor that night, he's like, will you stop taking your blood pressure? Unless you have a headache or passing out, he says, cut it out. And I'm not advocating that to anybody else. Talk to your doctor. But for me, he was like, stop it.
This is the doctor that has heard you for years and years and years have syphilis, with AIDS, with herpes, with all the stuff
It's not
on
that
top of each other.
It's that my AIDS and my herpes have syphilis. They call it syphilis. So he's like, calm down, buddy, calm down. I had been in psychotherapy for a number of years, and so I called my psychologist. I was like, Doc, what do you think? He's like, look, man, we're seeing this all over. People stayed strong during the pandemic, even though for a lot, particularly men, it was very scary. You didn't know if you could protect the health and safety of your family. You're worried about your ability to provide. Whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. You were nervous. He said, but you stayed strong for your family as long as you could. And now that you feel like there's a reprieve, he says, we're seeing particularly men go just into spirals. It's like that oil well I said at the beginning. It all comes spilling out. Dude, I was bedridden for like 4 days. I prayed constantly. I was like, God, I have no idea what's going on. Genuinely, just, I thought I was going to lose my mind because the fear was of such a level, I was having a hard time keeping two thoughts together. It was super duper scary. It took a bunch of different things to be able to deal with this. I did get on some pharmaceuticals and SSRI, and I was very reluctant. And I got on them, and they delightfully turned down some of the noise for me. I took my prayer life and my meditation life very seriously. I started stepping up my physical activity. And then there came like these other things that I realized were big helps for mental health. Getting back out and seeing my friends. Going back to my Rotary Club and see all my buddies and stuff like that. Super cathartic. And then when I got back on the road and saw my ag buddies, I was like, man, I miss these guys so bad. But I kept going back to God, and I was like, God, why? Is this punishment? What's going on? Why is this? I felt the Lord lay on my heart. There's a reason. There's something I need you to do with this. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure what that is. Be a test bunny for SSRIs? Like, I'm not sure. It was only just a few months later that I had a family member have the almost the same situation, and then friends, and then colleagues, and then somebody at the church. I had a dear friend whose son was really dealing with anxiety problems, and he and I would talk on the phone almost daily. It's like, okay, how are you feeling with this? Does this have a calming effect? Does this work? And I found God had put me in this ministry, and I had had this apex moment of my own symptoms, so I could speak with credibility and honesty. If you've never had one of these, man, you think the world's coming to an end. You're very skeptical of people being like, oh, calm down, it'll be okay. No, you're like, but will it? As I sit here today, I am very transformed by so much of the past 5 years. To see God come alongside me, to come alongside this business, I couldn't ask for a better job, man. I hope I retire getting to do this. Of course, I'm never retiring, but like this is honestly the best job in the world, to have a guy call you up and be like, Jeff, this is an issue that we're facing. Can you help me? And to be able to say, yes, I can help you. To be able to minister to people. And a lot of that is ministering to men. I have found myself being involved with guys either coming out of substance abuse recovery, people who have suffered traumatic things in the military or in combat, and being able to come alongside those guys and speak with empathy about the terrors and about the hurt and about the fears and all that stuff. I look back on it now and I say, early in my career, I was an ad man, okay? I was an ad man. I was the Don Draper, right? Dude, I'm telling you, I was all the way up one side and down the other ad man. I used to have the all-black suit, drove around in the 5 Series BMW, had the 2 martini lunch. I lived that life. I had this revelation. I was like, you know what, man? Who is my identity separated than that? Now, here I am, about to turn 48 years old next week. Who am I? I'm a minister of Jesus Christ. That's who I am. Sometimes I do that by helping people with marketing plans. or helping them come up with an idea to sell a piece of equipment or try to recruit a mechanic. And sometimes I do that by staying up late with a veteran who's got shrapnel in his back. And we're talking trash and telling nasty jokes and having fun. And eventually that evolves into a conversation where I tell them my own testimonies. Like, dude, man, let me tell you about when I stayed in bed for 3 days with nervous breakdown. And the things that I found help in that end. Or sometimes maybe it's you're on the phone with a guy because his wife has left him. Or someone who's been laid off from a job that they thought valued them. My priorities have shifted. Today I can say I'm a happy man who loves his family, who has the best of friends, best clients. I get to have really, really enjoyable experiences. And more than any of that, my God puts me in places to do his will. I mess it up most of the time. But that 10% that I get right, it makes it all worth it. And on top of it, I look like an aging Jesus. So, I've got that going for me.
I was going to go more with Jack Black, but if you want to go with the Lord and Savior.
I say that in Sunday school. I was like, hey, listen, y'all can say what you want, but one of us looks more like Jesus than the rest of you.
Jeff, I cannot thank you enough for your candor, for your care, for your honesty, for your transparency. One of the passions of this entire podcast, of this entire experiment, is to take the lessons that have been acquired through life, through career, not just our successes, but our failures, not just our highs, but our lows, and just talk about them in a very plain language way. Not polish them up, not turn stinkers into trophies, but just share them in a very plain way, because those are the people and those are the stories that have helped me in dark hours and have helped me in tough times and have helped me through both the personal and the professional side. And so whether we're talking about selling cameras or 4 days in bed, I just really appreciate your willingness to tell it like it was. And I know that the audience is going to appreciate and has appreciated your candor. Thanks so much.
I want to leave you with one last thought here. Just one simple thought. For every bully you come across, for every narcissist, for every just self-seeking fool, there's 10 of us that are cheering you on from a distance. There are 10 of us that are looking at your successes, that are agonizing in your challenges with you and stuff like that. Don't get frustrated. Make sure that you find one of those guys. For me, for my partner Richard, it was Kevin Bean, a guy who would say things like, you never have to apologize for putting your family first. He'd call you in the weekend just to say, how are you doing? And then sometimes he would say, and it would be very awkward, he's like, you're one of my dearest friends. He would just say that. I hope everyone out there finds one of those men to be in their life. Someone that you can go to and you can be like, man, I never want to let him down. I want to live up to as good as he thinks I can be. There's going to be people that find themselves in frustrating places. There's going to be bosses that you don't like. There's going to be scoundrels and scallywags and all that are going to do all sorts of nastiness. But for every one of them, there's 10 guys that love you and are cheering for you out there. Find one of those guys, stick with them, let them tell you some off-color jokes, tell them your hurts and your anguish and your challenges that you go through with life, and let them help you a little bit through the way because they got some wisdom.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice, Jeff. Thanks so much for spending time with us.
I appreciate you, my friend.
Talk to you later.
For those of you that wish to share praise, feedback, accolades, or large sums of money, you can reach me at justin@grody.io. While this last sentence is usually reserved for some sarcastic comment about people that disagree with topics in the episode, I would like to set the joke aside today to say, if you need to talk, please reach out to someone. Don't suffer in silence. Jeff shared his testimony for the purpose of giving hope. The road isn't easy, but a first step can be talking to someone who has walked the same road. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6 and 7. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.